Thank you for choosing Axxess On Demand. Axxess believes in continuing education, and we create content to empower you to learn and grow anytime, anywhere. Let's get started.
Hello, thanks for joining us for this webinar, which is going to help you onboard your best team. My name is Laura Barnett, and I'm on the marketing team at Axxess. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Axxess. We're a leading technology company serving organizations that provide healthcare in the home. We offer a complete suite of easy-to-use, innovative software solutions, empowering hospice, home health, and home care providers to grow their business while making lives better. If you have a question during today's webinar, please submit that through the chat box. We'll follow up with you after the webinar to ensure that it gets answered. Today, you're going to hear from my colleagues and friends, Anita Paxton and Billy Turner. Anita has spent more than 20 years partnering with companies ranging from small organizations to Fortune 500 companies in various industries to build teams. She has consulted in times of rapid organizational growth in a very competitive labor market, building and assessing organizations' hiring strategies to deliver talent to meet their organizational goals. Billy is the Senior People Director at Axxess. He oversees all aspects of human resources with the goal of placing the right people in the right place to execute Axxess's strategy. Billy's leadership has helped foster a workspace that has been recognized as a best place to work on multiple occasions. I know you guys are excited to get going and have a ton to cover today, so take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Laura, for the introduction, and we'll get started here. If you were with us in our previous webinar, you would have known that a couple of things that we covered were how to cultivate a culture-first mentality in hiring, how to best assess if your candidates are the right fit, and then how our new virtual work environment factors into hiring.
So today we're going to discuss creating a world-class employee experience to keep those new hires engaged and committed throughout their employee journey. We're also going to learn how to lead employees to embrace your company culture and drive growth. And also how to empower employees by providing them the information, tools, and support that they need to thrive in your organization.
I'm going to start off with a quote here, and it's from Laszlo Bock, which is the Google SVP of People Operations. At Google, we front load our people investment. This means the majority of the time and money spent on people is invested in attracting, assessing, and cultivating new hires. So as we proceed, I want you to consider the following question. What if your organization applied some of your most important attributes to the processes you use for obtaining, hiring, and retaining talent? I want you to think about that for a minute. So companies that execute a structured, comprehensive, and engaging onboarding process, they're more likely to attract and retain the best talent. So, you want to really create more of a employee-centric approach as it sets you up for sets your new hires up for success. So just results in lowering the turnover. It's going to lead to higher retention rates and stronger brand loyalty. So job satisfaction starts with feeling productive and valued. Satisfied employees create a constructive workplace and culture that directly impacts overall company performance. So let's define some of these key terms in the boarding process. And you'll hear me mention the boarding process. I think most people know it as onboarding, but we'll define that here shortly. And we're going to learn why it plays a critical role in the success of your organization. So as we move to define these terms, we're going to look at pre-boarding, onboarding, orientation, and team onboarding. But first, I want to share some information on the candidate journey that leads to the importance of understanding the meaning of these terms. Once a candidate has accepted an offer from an organization and completes the pre-employment screening, what happens next? Well, according to a survey conducted by LinkedIn, those that are left unattended during that time period, 80% of those candidates struggle. They struggle with anxiety. They're waiting to hear more about the new role. They're waiting before that job starts. And so that feeling just lingers on after their start date. And it can actually damage some of their enthusiasm and their productivity, and even the longevity that they are at an organization. So even worse, second thoughts can lead to declining an accepted offer. If you've experienced that before, where a candidate has said yes, and then prior to really onboarding that candidate, they may back out of the offer and change their mind. So, according to a survey by Robert Half, 28% of professionals have done this. So, it's not uncommon. Therefore, understanding the difference between pre-boarding and onboarding will help alleviate some of the anxiety. So let's start with onboarding or pre-boarding, sorry. Pre-boarding. Pre-boarding starts at the time the offer is accepted. And it's defined as the period of the early engagement prior to day one. So anything prior to day one is considered a pre-boarding. This period can last, it can be a few days up to several weeks. It depends on the time in which that person day one starts. So pre-boarding has a direct effect on the new hire experience. When executed, it allows you to really build engagement and enthusiasm long before their first day of employment. So later we'll share with you how both your recruitment and talent team or your HR team can actually play a role in the part of pre-boarding experience. Now let's go to onboarding. So onboarding starts at day one. Remember, pre-boarding prior to day one, onboarding really sets the stage for day one. So day one of the employment is just an ongoing process of engagement. It's a series of events. So during the onboarding process, new hires are immersed into the culture of the organization, and really starting to take in the business objectives of the organization. But it includes connecting to various teams or departments within the company to learn more about their strategy and just make the connection to the company-wide goals. Again, our HR and people team take the lead in this part of the experience. The question is, who takes the lead on the onboarding experience in your organization? Now, as we move on to orientation, so also known, people can sometimes refer to that as day one as well, because orientation is a stage of onboarding. It's not onboarding itself, it's just a stage of onboarding. This includes an introduction to the company's mission, vision, values, and completion of all of those employment documents that we know that people are just loving to do when they enter into an organization. Billy, is there anything you want to add prior to moving into team onboarding?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say about onboarding versus orientation. Orientation is really one of those tactical type things that you would have when you bring on a new employee. That's just giving them the basic information that they need. While onboarding, you go above and beyond. You can have more of a strategic vision about where you want to take that process with the new hire. And through a thorough and formalized onboarding process, you can extend the excitement that person has about joining your organization. So it's really important that you kind of take that philosophy of the onboarding process being an evolving type of situation versus orientation, which is really more specific and tactical to the first day, right? But I'm excited.
Perfect. All right, as we move on to team onboarding. So team onboarding, that's once you come out of the onboarding process with your HR people team, now we're moving them directly into their team. So this involves more of the learning how their teams are gonna function. How will that team function? This is a deep dive into that team strategy. Remember, in the onboarding process, they had the opportunity to get an overview. So here we're gonna really immerse them into that team strategy. We want them to learn the processes. We're going to give them access to different tools that team would use and different resources that they actually refer back to, as well as that communication style of the team. It's good to have them aligned with all members of the team so they can actually be more productive and function overall well. All right. Now let's look at the as Billy and I just stated, we were defining those terms. I'm going to fall back to pre-boarding, anything prior to day one with an organization. Onboarding is that day one and really engaging and learning more about the organization, the overall strategies of the different teams within the organization, as well as incorporating the function of orientation into that onboarding period. And then team onboarding. So after all that occurs and then they move to their team, then again, they're immersed into their team and how they function. So the onboarding life cycle overall, and most HR professionals or most people in organizations will consider the onboarding experience the overall experience. So when we look at the onboarding life cycle, it contains pre-boarding. You have the induction or onboarding and orientation, and then we have the integration, which brings us back to the team. So 44% of the workers who backed out of that job offer, which you heard me mention just a minute ago or a few minutes ago, prior to day one, they may have done that because they just received a better offer from another company. But really, what does a better offer look like? We can't be sure of what that looks like, but we know that, higher salaries are only the fourth most important factor for a person that's looking for a new job. And much more important are the company's culture, the personal value fit, and a need for a new challenge. So really, when you really take a deep dive in that, people aren't always just attracted to the dollar. It's about a lot more than that. You know, we're experiencing a shift in today's workforce. And so when it comes to priorities and organizations being successful, we've learned that organizations that are thriving today, they've been actively cultivating a few things. One is resilience, two is courage, three is judgment, and four is flexibility and preparation. So here are a few ways in which your organization can shift to a thriving mindset if you haven't already. One, you can incorporate quality of life. And when we talk about quality of life, we previously referred to work-life balance. We've talked about work-life integration, but today we're talking about quality of life. And quality of life is going to integrate the physical, mental, financial, and social health into the design of work itself. And then we want to look at personal choice. So empowering people with just more control over what they do and their learning experience and how they pursue those learning experiences are really important. Three, we're going to incorporate automation and technology. When the pandemic came across, we had to shift and learn a new way of working remotely. We have managed people in a remote environment, but what happens when your whole organization becomes remote, or over half of your organization moves to a remote environment? Not only that, but just how we're engaging through, whether it was telehealth, how are we reaching, how are our teams reaching those patients? Technology played a key role in helping define how we worked and thrived in the work environment in 2020 and in 2021. So also, look at your HR team's role. And if you are that strategic thinker in HR, just shifting from standardizing and reinforcing workforce policies to becoming an architect. So you're going to re-architect work. So reimagine the what, why, the who, and the how of work across the entire organization. And those are some things that you can do to shift to be a thriving organization in today's work environment, which also impacts the entire life cycle of your employee. So 69% of the employees are most likely to stay with a company for 3 years if they experience great onboarding. And this was quoted by Sherm. And also 94% of employees would stay with a company longer if there was an investment in learning. And this was actually the source, and this was LinkedIn. So here at Axxess, we've invested in a certification program, which provides just various levels of understanding and learning across the industry. So different verticals, whether it's home health, hospice, or home care, those become more of our fundamental, intermediate, and advanced levels. We know that it's important for our teams that are really creating the technology to help drive the performance of organizations. We know that it's important for everyone in our organization to be able to connect to that, to really understand it better. Because when you really understand the why and how you're working and what you're working toward the goal, it will better help you produce and support in ways that are going to just lead to overall success.
To add to what Anita said, an effective onboarding strategy is really, really important to the success of your new team member, but it's also critical to the success of your organization. And these are just some reasons why that's the case. First, maximize your retention and loyalty. According to Click Onboarding, an employee onboarding that's really effective, 69% of employees are more likely to stay with the company for 3 years if they experience a great onboarding. Just think of the cost of the company to bring on a new hire. If that person stays for 3 years, that is an investment that you're making in them as well as your company. But you're also going to be strengthening your company culture through an effective onboarding process. It helps them and new members of the team understand the company's vision, mission, and values, and it also reinforces the expectation and behaviors that that you'll expect when they join your company, right? And once they have that sense of culture, then they're going to have that sense of belonging. That's where, to get to that first point about them staying for at least 3 years, they're going to be part of your team, part of your family. They're going to have that sense of inclusion that you are trying to drive within your organization. A study in 2020 from Deloitte said 93% of respondents indicated that a strong sense of belonging drives organizational performance. And a great onboarding program can dramatically reduce the anxiety and increase a new hire's sense of belonging as they grow in that team. But it's also about productivity, right? I mean, we're all in business to make things happen, make things succeed. And productivity is a key piece of that. So our friends at Glassdoor indicated a strong onboarding process can improve productivity by more than 70%. By outlining clear job expectations, organizational expectations, you can reduce errors. And of course, from an employee standpoint, you're going to reduce frustration on their part. Nobody comes to work wanting to do a bad job. They're coming to work wanting to do the right thing, and they're excited to be there. So we need to set up this structure around them to let them be a success. And like I mentioned before when we were talking, the cost of turnover is huge. Those of us HR folks who are in SHRM, society, and those who may not be in SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management, they had a benchmarking report that said the average cost to hire in the U.S. is over $4,000. It's actually $4,129. That's amazing, and it took the average of 42 days to fill a position. Anita, 42 days to fill a position. What do you think about that, recruiter?
And you know what? I think that's probably extended. It's probably even longer now.
That's right. So we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing when we're bringing those folks on so we can get long-term employee engagement. And I know I'm talking to Anita on this last bullet point. We want to make sure that we're attracting top talent, okay? Because it's a small world, even in these days where we're all online, we're all virtual. All these sites have where people can share their experiences, like Glassdoor, where people can share their experiences with a company. And the word will spread quickly of what your onboarding process is like, what it's like to interview with your company. So from a retention standpoint, you can improve new hire retention by over 82% with that effective onboarding process. And Nita, is there any other kind of examples that you may have about top talent and how the way you bring on top talent really helps you in your role as a recruiter?
Absolutely. When we really look at the, you know, why that effective boarding strategy is critical. Once we bring in new hires, one way to alleviate that 42 days that it took to fill a position becomes employee referrals. And we want those new employees that are coming into the organization, we create the excitement, all of the excitement they get and all the enthusiasm they get prior to starting. We want that to continue through onboarding and team onboarding. But that also helps us with referrals. You know, I can think of a good conversation that I had with a quote unquote Axxessian. That's what we call our folks within our organization, Axxessians. That we really talked about the experience, what happened during the pre-boarding process, those things that you could connect to, and the onboarding. But what it really did was it really invigorated him to really start thinking of other people that he knew that would be great for the organization. So that really impacts referrals. And referrals, if you ask anyone on your team that's recruiting talent, referrals are a key part of that. Because when you have someone in the organization that understands the culture, that understands your business goals and objectives, they think about that when they're starting to refer their friends, because they only want to refer people for success. No one wants to refer anyone to fail. As Billy said, no one starts out to do a bad job.
Exactly right, Anita. Thank you. Well, here are some other key stats that we've found from Bamboo HR. Some of our friends at Bamboo HR, I don't know if you've ever used Bamboo HR from an HR management system or not, but they had some great studies with it as it relates to effective onboarding and its impact on you. So for job satisfaction, employees felt their onboarding was highly effective, were 30 times more likely to have high job satisfaction if they had an effective onboarding program. Wow, 30 times more likely to have high job satisfaction.
Wow.
But the way they get there is through engagement. And organizations using effective onboarding have 33% more employees who felt engaged compared to organizations with ineffective onboarding. So ineffective onboarding, to me, may be those organizations who just have that really quick, like I mentioned before, tactical orientation type of way to welcome a new hire, rather than a formalized, structured, strategic onboarding process. And then organizational support. Employees who felt onboarding was highly effective were 48 times more likely or feel more supported by their organization. So they felt that themselves as they were becoming part of the organization. So I think it's really important that we focus on the impact that we're having in this process as we bring on new folks. Anita, have you seen some of these things I know you've seen them at Axxess because we experience this every day, but have you seen some of this, these kind of statistics in your past when it comes to onboarding?
Absolutely. And I think as we get a little bit further, we'll really talk about the importance of that engagement piece. And you know, we talked about it a little bit in pre-boarding, but engagement is huge. But engagement is huge, not just with pre-boarding. It's important all the way through the life cycle, engagement and communication. So.
Perfect.
All right. As we move on, we're going to look at reinforcing culture throughout boarding. So first thing, culture attracts world-class talent. I hope y'all believe that, because your culture is one of the things that people really want to connect to. People want to work for an organization that lives out its mission every single day. They're wanting growing and maintaining a consistent culture across all teams or your areas of business, whether it's your field staff, your front office, or your back office. It's really essential for attracting the best talent. So a culture that places people first, has a positive impact on attraction, and it also increases employee retention. And I know we just shared some numbers, but just think about that. Who would have thought that really the way that you project your culture and what your employees experience as they start to enter the organization really impacts the retention. So remember, it's not only attracting world-class talent, it's about retaining world-class talent. So there's a fight for talent right now out here. If you have been really looking to grow and build your organization, or even if you're looking to really fill in some of those key gaps within your organization, start out with your great company culture, because it places your organization in a position to really be competitive. And so the culture that's shared with others, it must be the culture that you really deliver through action. We can talk about it, but if we don't deliver it, it's another thing. So your organization's reputation is the primary reason why highly talented individuals want to work for you. A strong purpose and a mission are also important factors for determining where they work. You heard me mention earlier that salary is fourth on their list of what people are looking for. You know, you can pay me a lot, but if you don't deliver what I need, you create anxiety and stress and frustration. And who wants to work like that? We want to make sure that that culture and what they're connecting to is all part of the package. Next, we'll go into organizational alignment. So organizations gain momentum when their employees are really aligned. So moving in the same direction and all moving toward the same goal. That is why onboarding is critical, because you begin aligning people to the goals of your business. Alignment causes it actually creates your roadmap for growth, and being purposeful and intentional in assessing the talent needs. And also an aligned organization is agile. They move in lockstep. So when there's a shift in the organization, you have to have everyone steering that same direction. They're also open to, you know, that agility gives that ability to shift quickly with workforce trends and with any regulatory changes that may impact your team. We have a culture of collaboration and teamwork here to create organizational alignment and agility in hiring here at Axxess. And pretty proud to say so, because really being in technology, there are shifts that occur inherently, as well as all of the shifts that occur within the environment and the workforce around us. Next.
Well, I mean, Anita, it's really about engaged employees at the
Absolutely.
end of the day, right?
Absolutely.
Because organization's culture really is a force that's behind the engagement that employees feel on a day in and day out basis. It influences the way they work together, how they make decisions, kind of the behaviors that are rewarded, and who gets promoted. The culture sets the tone for the workforce. And the way you set that tone initially is through an effective, strategic, and very thoughtful onboarding process. And it can be a major influence about whether an employee is attracted to join or not. And from Anita, we'll talk about this later, referrals. That's one of the best places where we get new Axxessians. I'm going to say Axxessians because that's what we call ourselves here. Where we get the best talent here are through referrals. And the way we get those is through engagement with people who work here, letting them feel the excitement, and then wanting to share that excitement with people in their network. So they're the fuel for the organization. That's what drives us, right? But it's also about performance at the end of the day. Why are we here? If we're not about performance, what's the company going to do? And culture really impacts that. So there's a direct link between employees understanding their organization's purpose, their culture, and their measures for how they're doing as a business so they can make an impact on that. So you need to make sure that all of those things are explained early in the onboarding process. And we're going to get into a lot more about that here coming up pretty soon. But that kind of reinforces the culture piece a little bit more for you. But what I want to do is talk to you a little bit more about some more impacts and how they're going to impact in the organization. I mentioned that culture and Anita and I talked about the culture on that previous slide, but effective onboarding is really impacting how that culture is being received by your new employees. 89%, this is again from our friends at Glassdoor, I'm sorry, Bamboo HR. 89% feel that their organization is more aligned with the culture than 59% who did not get an effective onboarding process. And we want them to be committed to the organization, right, Anita? Because that leads to that retention. And they're 18 times more committed to the organization than if they didn't have that effective onboarding process. And they get that they get that 18% connectedness to the organization through connectedness. This is an amazing stat to me. An effective onboarding is 91% feel connected to work versus 29% without an effective onboarding process. Those folks who have that traditional tactical 1 day, half day little orientation are missing a great opportunity to connect the person who is coming onto your organization with your purpose, your mission, what they can do to make an impact on those. You're missing the opportunity to do that if you don't have an effective onboarding process.
And I think really, Billy, if I can inject, is that really just if you do not have your boarding process, if you don't have that built out, we'd encourage you to take some of the information that you're learning here, really look at it, build it out even more. And I know it becomes an investment in time, right? It becomes an investment in the time, the staff there. But when you really look at the numbers that Billy's sharing with us, by creating and investing in that time up front will really pay dividends to the organization later.
You're absolutely right, Anita. So let's talk about the onboarding process, or excuse me, the boarding process overall, right? And how that kind of ties in. So we have the 4 C's. So Anita,
And I
what are
think
4 C's?
I know
Is that a new band,
maybe you've
the 4
already
C's?
you may have heard this before, the 4 C's, and really how does your organization connect with the 4 C's? And they're going to touch on culture, clarification, compliance, and connection. And I know you keep hearing us talk about referrals. I get excited. I really get excited in talking talent overall and connecting with people. But really, referrals can be from different sources. From different sources that have interacted with your organization. Your workforce, your staff are an extension of your recruitment team. Have you ever thought about that? It's an extension of your recruitment team. And so that means if you have 2 recruiters, 3 recruiters, 10, whatever that number is, you can double that easily by just tapping into the people within your organizations. And we learn that for us, referrals from our Axxessians, they've been higher than any other source. You know, we spend money on LinkedIn and things like that, different sources to help us connect to talent. When we have the connection sitting in the seats in our organization around us, part of that is because they can connect to the culture. When they have connected with the culture, they know what you're looking for. They know the type of talent that you're looking for. They know those that have the skill sets that's needed, and they become part of your boarding team because they're engaging with the people that they've referred into the organization. They are helping provide some of the culture. They're helping reinforce that culture, and we'll talk about that even more because they can provide clarity to questions that they may ask that they may be afraid to ask sometimes. So really, when we look at the 4 C's, we're looking at taking a balanced approach just by adopting these in your boarding or quote unquote onboarding process. So by no means it's an original concept, but it should be considered like best practice for your for you to implement the 4 C's of onboarding. So again, culture, clarification, compliance, and connection. It's important to note that companies that pay too much attention to compliance, they're really doing it at the expense of the other 3 C's. So take a balanced approach when you're doing this.
Right, and that's exactly right, Anita, because if you have that balanced approach, that's what's going to best serve your employees and keep them engaged and productive, right? So you need to make sure that you kind of move from that transactional focused approach to bringing on a new employee, more of that orientation type of philosophy, right? Because it's been estimated that about $37 million a year, billion dollars a year, is wasted every year by U.S. companies because new employees don't fully understand their job when they first come onto a team. So your new hires will be much more productive after going through an effective and thought out onboarding process that enriches their learning, gets them socialized with the other members of their team, rather than just concentrating on forms and compliance and all that kind of stuff, right? So let's start with the C's. All right, I'm gonna kind of do them kind of a little bit out of order. I like to do things out of order. It drives Anita crazy, but that's, I don't need to bring y'all into our work life, but I'm gonna start with compliance. Since I'm an HR person, I'm gonna start with compliance. Even though I've told y'all that we don't need to focus on compliance in this, there are some elements of compliance that have to be done. We all know that as HR people, it has to be done. So new hires must be introduced to things like health and safety, legal requirements, company policies and rules and things like that. There's also paperwork that has to be done. This is like the baseline information that you have to do to be legally compliant with the organization, to maintain the welfare of your employees. It's, as an HR person, I'll tell you, it's not the most fun thing to talk about. It's one of those things where everybody, when you say you work in HR, people sometimes will roll their eyes or whatever, but there are reasons behind what we do, things that we do, and you can do compliance in such a way that it makes it a rewarding experience for a newly hired person, and it's not traditional or transactional. Don't you agree, Anita?
I do agree. And when you think about recruitment, there's even a compliance component to recruitment. We want to make sure that we are being compliant as we vet and we take new candidates through the pre-employment experience and making sure that they're meeting all of those legal compliance, our policies when it comes to hiring. So we want to make sure that as a recruitment team, your recruitment team is making sure that even when it comes to the job offer, is that process being followed? Is the process being followed when it comes to pre-employment? Those are the ways that we can really connect from a recruitment side.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely right. We also need to make sure that we provide that clarification, right? Because when new hires come on board with us, we need to make sure that they have a clear understanding of any kind of work behavior, performance expectations, those type of things when they come on board. Because again, some of those things may be anxiety feeling, right? But the unknown is something that is going to cause them anxiety. So part of the boarding process needs to be that clarification piece, so you can make sure that they have that complete understanding. Is there something that our friends on recruiting can do to help us with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. When you think about going through the whole process of recruitment and the interview process, there are a lot of things that's happening, and you really want to make sure that everything is clarified. You're going to clarify all along the way, whether you're clarifying the role, the expectations of the role, the salary even. Make sure that you're constantly providing those key points. That comes back to engagement. So engaging, when the dust settles, the offer's been accepted, the process had began for doing all the pre-employment, things are starting to settle down a little bit for that candidate. Engagement means going back all along the way as you talk to them, as you keep that level of anxiety down, as you share with them what will it look like for day one. You're going to clarify. You're going to clarify the salary, the benefits, all of those things.
Exactly. And getting back to what we talked about a little bit earlier on that previous slide, culture. You have to clearly communicate your culture to folks. That's another piece of why they joined you in the first place. You shared that with them during the interview process, because I know last time most of you were on our last webinar where we talked about hiring the best for your team, right? So culture plays a huge important part of that recruiting process, as well as your employer brand as well. So we'll be talking more about culture as it relates to the boarding process here in a minute. But I said, as I wanted to make sure we talk about connection too, making sure people are connected to their teammates during the boarding process and start building those relationships early. And that's where they can become part of the team, and making sure you're setting that groundwork for supportive connections throughout the organization, not just on their team, but maybe on different teams, because we want to make sure that they understand that you're not building teams within a silo. You're building teams that collaborate across the organization, and the onboarding process assists with it. So when we talk about onboarding and considering those 4 C's, there's 3 different levels of that. You have your passive onboarding, right? So that's where you have your compliance, because I told you, notice on this chart, all 3 of these have that compliance piece of it. That's us HR people, and we're forcing everybody to do that. That's just the things that you have to do. Clarification. Passive onboarding, you provide some context to their job, but not much. Then you provide a little culture, maybe not much, and no connection at all. So there's no meeting of your new teammates. There's no meeting others throughout the organization to help start build those relationships during the onboarding process. So in my mind, a passive onboarding would be more of that tactical orientation, if you will, doing exactly what we have to, checking those boxes and doing no more. And it's interesting that research shows that about 30% of organizations of all sizes, large, medium, and small, perform at that level. That's unfortunate to me. Can you believe that, Anita? 30%? That's unbelievable. So we want to make sure that we move toward more of the high potential, right? That's where compliance and clarification are covered. Make sure there's a formal process for that. And about 50% of companies are doing this, but it's unfortunate that those 50% of companies are missing the culture and connection piece, where they only provide some of that context. The key would be moving past that to the proactive onboarding. And that's where you're building on all 4 of the 4 C's of compliance, clarification, culture, and connection in a formal way. Make sure your firm has a systematic approach to onboarding people, and it's a strategic focus of everybody throughout the organization, because this is not just about recruiting in HR, talking to somebody. Proactive onboarding is an organization-wide effort to make sure new employees are welcomed and given the tools, resources, and information they need to be a success. And at this point, there's only 20% of organizations who are really achieving this level of proactive onboarding. So let's start talking about the process a little bit, Anita. What do you think?
Absolutely.
So let's talk about pre-boarding.
Pre-boarding best practices. So companies with pre-boarding best practices in place are 11% more likely to retain the first year employees compared to those without pre-boarding. And those companies that use pre-boarding are 1.6 times likely to have a lower cost per hire rate than those without pre-boarding. This was shared by Aberdeen Group. Many organizations will mistakenly just wait. They just wait until the first day and before that person starts work. So they really miss the whole process of pre-boarding. and they just move right into onboarding and orientation. And in many cases, there will be a delay by weeks, days, or months even before that new team member begins. And remember, I shared with you about the anxiety that builds up with them. So this presents a great opportunity for you to use this time before to connect with them, to build that excitement, and to help them feel part of the team before they even start and meet the entire team. You want to also give them a steady stream of information. This will help you as to get them up to speed quicker. One of the ways that you can do this is sharing on social media. If your company is on social media, you want those team members to connect. That's a good way of getting updated and finding out what's happening with the organization as they continue to go through the process. Also, it's a good time for your talent team to connect back with them, or your recruitment team to connect back with them to clarify and reinforce some of those things that what they have seen on social media. So leverage social media as a source. So consider pre-boarding process. Consider your current process after you select the candidate to fill an open position with your organization. Does the process experience really represent the culture that you and your leadership within your organization want to have? You have to ask yourself that question. If that question's no, make change. So when we look at culture, reinforcing that why, it's an opportunity to just really reinforce your company's values, their value proposition, your employee value proposition that creates that stability and flexibility. We talked about, quality of life. All of those things, you want to make sure you're also focusing on learning and development. Here we utilize our Axxess certification program to really help our people connect to their why. Most people that are coming into the organization want to give back. They want to deliver on something that's going to really, really make an impact on the industry and a positive impact. So it's a clear way of investing. You have to invest in your employees, and your new hires will probably accept your offer because, they find a true connection with your company and with your employee value proposition. So use the pre-boarding experience just to reinforce this. And also, another thing you do is send welcome kits. So if your company has any swag, share that swag with them. Those that are remote, drop it in the mail. It can really create that excitement prior to their first day. So some of those welcome kits, whether you have shirts, pins, whatever the case may be, you want to make sure that t-shirts, whatever, branded items are there to connect them with your organization. When we talk about clarification and talk about the job offer here, extending that job offer is an essential part of the pre-boarding process. So the way that this offer is handled reinforces your culture. And should you express excitement and that person has accepted a role, you want to know that you're excited, just as excited to have them come on board. And then when we really go in and look again, reviewing the onboarding process itself, after extending the offer, you want to preparing them with new hires what to expect during that process. So in that pre-boarding experience, you're preparing them for the onboarding process. You want them to listen, to answer any questions that they may have when they start to come on board. So your recruiting team and your HR team here at Axxess, we actually do the dance. We call this the dance, where we've already connected with them as the recruitment team. We're layering on another layer of support by then bringing in our HR team, right, Billy?
Oh yes, it's the dance, all right, Anita. We have fun with that because it's part of the partnership we have between our teams, and that's part of what the new employees feel. They hear that teamwork. They see that teamwork between the recruiting team and the HR team when they're getting that information about their job offer and about the process that they can expect when they come on board. And I mentioned before about paperwork. Of course, employees have to know that it's critical that we are onboarding them in the right way. Now, on the pre-boarding process, from a compliance standpoint, you have the pre-employment screening. Different companies have different set of rules when it comes to pre-employment screening. Some people do criminal background screening. Some people add on a drug screening to that. Then maybe there's a credential verification in some organizations. Whatever your organization has for a pre-employment screening, it needs to be, of course, followed in a consistent way every time, because otherwise you're going to run into some legal issues if you don't, right, Anita?
Absolutely. I heard you say paperwork. Is that electronic? Can that be electronic?
It certainly can. Some organizations have electronic where it's part of their applicant tracking system, where you initiate a background screening through the applicant tracking system. Some people do it through a fax-based system, old school. Whatever your organization has established, it's important that you follow that process thoroughly. And from a compliance standpoint, from the offer letter, you mentioned job offer a few minutes ago, Anita.
Mm-hmm.
It's important that that job offer mentions that it's contingent on the successful completion of a background screening, right? Because something comes back on the background screening, you want to make sure you're covered where you have to maybe rescind an offer due to something you found. But again, nothing's better than talking about compliance. I know y'all are all fired up about talking about compliance. But another piece of compliance is discussing the expectations for day one on paperwork. We have the I-9. Everybody understands the employment verification form that we have to complete on day one. So they need to understand what they need to bring with them from a document standpoint for that first day, just so you can have it, because there is a clock that's running on that. You have to do that within 3 days of the person joining. So make sure they understand the importance of doing that. Now let's talk about something a lot more glamorous. I'm going to say glamorous because I understand my people. Compliance is a cool thing for us, but connection is even more important. We want to make sure that that team connection begins. So we want to make sure that they start meeting people from their team. So maybe they get a handwritten note from a member of their team. It's always nice, like Anita said when we talked about that welcome kit. Maybe something that can be included in the welcome kit is a handwritten note from a teammate. I've had videos sent of team showing their excitement of somebody joining the team. So we just need to make sure that that continues to happen. Okay, and then of course, we want to make sure that you have that team engagement. So maybe they have that phone call, and maybe you can personalize that in some way with the members of your team. All right, Anita, let's go. I'm excited to get day one going. What do you think?
Absolutely.
All right, so day one. So for day one, it's important for us to have that warm welcome with your new employees. So, oops, sorry, I'm having mouse trouble. I need to get me a new mousetrap. So, as I scrolled through, I noticed that I missed a great quote that I found doing the research for this, Anita. And that's from Don McPherson from 12 Geniuses. Said the onboarding process, particularly that first week, is like a first date. You need to make a great first impression. Show up on time and be ready for them. Have a smile on your face. This could be the biggest decision they make in their life. That's amazing. That is one of the biggest decisions you make of where to work. At least one of the biggest decisions is going to be made that year. So be ready for them and instill that confidence that you have in their abilities. So I think that was an interesting thought from him, thinking it's like a first date.
It is. I haven't had a first date since in about 28 years, but I can still remember back that far.
Really? Well, I bet you didn't understand that onboarding webinar. You're going to talk about dancing between HR and recruiting and first dates, but this is a webinar you're getting with Anita and Billy, right? All right. So again, to get back to the warm welcome. So companies these days rarely have downtime. So we want to make sure that you can slow down and have a thoughtful process when it comes to onboarding new employees, and it doesn't seem haphazard to them. Because again, if it seems like that, if you're getting back to that date analogy, right? If you come to the door and you don't look well put together, it doesn't make it seem like you care about that person enough to plan and present yourself in the right way. Onboarding is really the same when it comes to that. They're taking a big risk by joining your company. Okay, you need to show them that they made that right decision in joining your company. So how can you get off on the right foot? Don't leave them waiting in the lobby. You got them waiting in the lobby. You told them to be there at 8. 8 comes, 8:10, you're not in the lobby. They're looking at their watch. Did I get the right place? Don't do that. Make sure that you have the right things in the lobby, ready to greet them. Maybe even have the hiring manager come greet them in the lobby too, before HR gets started with their paperwork and things like that. So we want to make sure that we have a polite, welcoming experience for that, and incorporate your culture throughout the presentations that you have. You're going to show them about your product, your services, all of those different types of things. Make sure that your culture is reflected through all of those. Now, of course, you want to set the expectations on day one about what you can expect throughout the process, so they can understand where they need to ask questions beforehand. If they have any questions, they understand where they're going to learn that information. And again, you have to make sure they have that complete understanding of who you are as a company, why you're doing what you're doing. That's where they're going to make that connection for the meaningful work you're about to have them do, and they can understand they're going to be part of something great by being in your organization. So that's one of the first steps as well, is outlining your company's vision and mission and where they fit into that growth trajectory of your company. All right, here we go. Day one paperwork. All right, I put this here because traditionally this is where people in HR put day one paperwork. We send paperwork beforehand, but you can also do it on day one. Day one paperwork, your I-9, W-4, and all that, but company policies also, giving them the parameters of what they need to do as a group. And then connection, making sure they're meeting their teammates. Let's have a team lunch. Always, so they can share more about themselves, what they like to do for fun, more about their family, get to make those personal relationships and start that relationship building. And then, of course, give them a mentor to meet. Let them know this is a person that they can come to with those questions about the organization, their role, just somebody to bounce an idea or a question off of. That's a great time to introduce them to a mentor. All right. So then you move into their first week, because I know you got past that first day and all those first day jitters. So you have to build off day one. So it continues to be important that the onboarding process keeps acclimating them to the culture and engaging them at different rates throughout the process to make sure that they're building those relationships with their teammates. You have to reinforce your company's values, though, because you don't want to lose focus of your company's values and your company culture as that first week continues. You're going to give them, of course, their benefits and what benefits they can enroll in, things like that. So you're going to give them all that information, but more clearly define job responsibilities. They got the job offer when Anita and her team brought them on board. But now we need to be more specific about what you're going to do day to day to move your career forward with the company. And getting back to compliance. I'm always coming back to compliance, aren't I, Anita? But you have to make sure that everybody understands the health, safety, and security protocols, particularly in our world of COVID these days. Your company is going to have COVID protocols. We need to make sure that they understand what your protocols are with regards to COVID-19 or any other safety protocols, as well as working in the office. What it comes, like if there's a fire or some other kind of natural disaster in the office, what do they do? And then you have required trainings, HIPAA training, sexual harassment. All these different types of things are required from a compliance standpoint, but you can space them out over the first week so they're not inundated with this type of information on one day. So you can spread it out where you have a piece of culture added with a required training, added with more information about their job, then talk about their benefits. So you can spread that out so it's not overwhelming in one subject or one area, but you can make it a rewarding experience at the same time. But I also think it's important that they build that connection with their manager by having that one-on-one lunch with their manager. I always like to have lunch. It seems to be that's where you get a lot more information about the person, who they are, when you're eating a meal. So I think it's important that the managers have lunch with their newly hired employees so they can get to building that personal connection. But also team engagement. We can have like team building activities. Even if you're in a virtual environment, you can have virtual scavenger hunts with the team and start partnering them up with other people so they can, again, start building those relationships prior to team onboarding, which Anita talked about earlier. What do you think about that first week, Anita?
Absolutely. Excuse me. Absolutely, Billy.
All right.
Those are all important.
So onboarding really continues after the first week. You don't just stop after the first week. Onboarding keeps going.
Absolutely. Onboarding is a continuation. And so when you look at culture and you're looking at really considering your employer brand, how do you market that? Your, of course, your new hires, the people within the organization is going to reinforce that employer brand. They're going to reinforce it through social media. Your website, it's reinforced even through the branded items that you're sending out to the team earlier during the pre-boarding process. And those that are shared once they onboard, those are all important. The behavior and the skills of the employee, since the brands are built through those actions and not words. So just know that every interaction that you have with a person helps to reinforce the behavior of your employer brand. Also, employees need to understand that every interaction that they have with your clients or your customers and the community is another way to reinforce, your positive employer brand, your company's mission, vision, values. It's all a part of that. Words on paper is one thing, but what you actually live out is another thing. And then we talk about alignment of values to recognition. All of us come to work every day to do meaningful work. We show up to do meaningful work. And so as a company, it's important that the way that your company recognizes success, that it's going to be aligned with your company values. And then even performance goals.
Right. So performance goals are another favorite topic of ours in HR because we want to make sure we're setting them up for success, because a source of anxiety is, am I going to be a success here? Am I going to make an impact in this organization? So we have to have clearly defined performance goals and discuss them with them early and often during the onboarding process, because that removes that anxiety from a new member of the team and it lets them take personal ownership of their own performance.
And then we provide internal growth opportunities.
Yeah, because the performance, once they perform, they're going to grow, right, Anita?
We want them to grow within the organization. That's one of the ways that we continue to help make sure that our ecosystem is solid. And one of the ways that you do that is making sure that they understand what opportunities of growth are out there, but also make sure that there's a documented process. It's imperative that we ensure that consistency and fairness throughout that internal growth, the internal growth opportunities that are offered within. And then, we look at compliance. Again, right. Billy.
Yep, and I love how everybody loves how she said compliance, Billy. I'm just kidding. Upskilling and cross-training. The training doesn't stop after the first week. We have to continue to grow that person in the products and services that your organization provides. One of the cool ways that we do that at Axxess is through our Axxess certification program, where you become fundamental, you go through the fundamental track, then intermediate, then advanced track. So you have a really solid knowledge of our products and services so you can make a better decision as you go throughout your day.
And, earlier I mentioned that when you're talking about upskilling and reskilling and cross-training your employees, you have to really make sure that you're allowing them to be able to engage in that learning in a way that is meaningful to them. And by the use of technology is a great way for them to really guide their learning process, whether it be through certification and other ways in which they can learn within your organization.
Right. And many of you on this webinar are with organizations that require credentials either for clinicians or other professionals. And it's important that you establish what your company's protocols are regarding credentials and the timing on getting those and how those are stored. So in case there's a visit from some agency or something like that, you can be prepared for that. So it's important that you make those connections with the person early in the onboarding process to let them know what your organization stance is and let them understand the importance your organization places on compliance.
And then when we talk about connection, again, scheduling those check-ins, whether with the manager or with their mentor, have some planned out, put on the calendar, scheduled connections. Also, we want to make sure that we are pulling ourselves back into the process, being a talent and HR team in those 30, 60, and 90-day marks, making sure that we're getting feedback on the experience that the person is receiving as they move along the way. Really investing in their success is through connection and communication. And then again, gathering that feedback, that 30, 60, 90-day, feedback is important, and it just doesn't happen at those points. It happens throughout. So connecting, communicating, there's opportunities that we have to improve what we're doing. We are not perfect. You're not perfect. And the best way to really find ways in which to improve is through gaining feedback from those who've gone through the process and experienced it in ways that we may not have in a long time. So ideally, onboarding never ends. It's with regular meetings and feedbacks, those connections, as well as taking longer views of what's expected of the company and the employee. You can beat the odds, and you can really impact positively your retention rates.
And I know we're really up against time, but I wanted to give you 3 more key stats of this effective onboarding. You can increase performance by 38% by having an effective onboarding. Give them the role clarity that they need to do their job, increases by 14%, and time to contribute, 49%. That translates to ROI very quickly for your organization. Because as Ben Franklin said, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. Wise man Ben Franklin is. So I want to thank you and turn it back over to Laura to wrap us up.
Thank you, Billy. I appreciate it. I want to thank both you and Anita for sharing your wisdom and your insights with us today. If you submitted a question via the chat, we're going to follow up with you via email just because we are over on time. We're also going to email everyone who registered for the webinar a link to the presentation as well as a link to the recording so you can share that with your colleagues. Thank you so much for joining us today as we deliver on our mission to empower healthcare organizations and professionals with the world's best technology solutions. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining our on-demand training today. Axxess is the only home healthcare technology company approved by the American Nurses Credentialing Center to offer continuing education credits and the most recommended home health software on Software Advice. You can watch more on-demand training videos through our industry-leading help center or at axxess.com, where you'll find tutorials, blogs, white papers, and answers to frequently asked questions. Axxess, empowering care anytime, anywhere.